I would like to introduce our third speaker. Elsa is the CEO and founder of SökerData. She is striving to bring better data diversity through clinical trials, ensuring that there is representation of everyone in those trials, and she will explain why that is such an important thing moving forward. I could list all of her accolades, but I would be here for a very, very long time, and you don't want to hear me talk for that long, I promise you. But those accolades do include a medal from Queen Elizabeth II for exceptional work during the biggest Ebola outbreak in Guinea in Africa, which is an unbelievable achievement. So please put your hands together for Elsa.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we? Good. Love it. Okay. So as Owen mentioned, my name is Elsa, and I like to start off with this slide, which I loved it because I noticed, of course, that Kerry, everyone had a baby picture of theirs. This is me, probably aged 5, similar to Kerry. I'm a middle child. But also my parents said I danced to the beat of the drum in my head. So they would say, Elsa, do X, and I will do Z. But also I come from an African family, very successful, but that also meant that my career choices were 3 folds. Be a doctor, be an engineer, or be a lawyer, or you failed. So in true fashion, I did go on to become a scientist. I did molecular biology, and the first picture is me out in Guinea during the biggest Ebola outbreak in West Africa with the WHO. I went on to complete my PhD in infectious diseases and global health at the University of Liverpool. And throughout these processes, I found a problem, the problem which is data and the lack of data, specifically from women and minority ethnics or global majority populations, depending on how we phrase it. And I went on to solve that problem. And this is a Forbes article, which, yes, it's in French, and essentially just says the researcher turned entrepreneur. It wasn't in my career path. My dad still says that it shocks him till this day, but here we are. So as I mentioned, I come from Cameroon, and it's in West Central Africa. And that was my first home. I've lived in the UK now for about 17 years, so second home. But also, I'm the child of a diplomat. So my dad has lived in about 7 countries. And Nigeria, which is right next to Cameroon, is his last duty station. He's due to retire in June. And I spent I got back last week from Nigeria, where I had spent almost 3 weeks. I was spending time on ground in Abuja and Lagos, engaging with PIs, so principal investigators, engaging with hospitals, engaging with venture capitalists, and trying to understand where is data captured, where is it held, what is the scope of clinical trials, specifically from these countries, and also what is the outcome from these patients. I kid you not, I knew it existed, but what I saw on ground was 100 times worse than I thought. You had these PIs telling me that they saw 3 to 4 new breast cancer cases every week, almost all of them at stage 3 or stage 4, almost all of them TNBC, so triple negative breast cancer, almost none of them responding to treatment, almost all of them questioning if they had the diagnosis right, and if they had the diagnosis right, if it was the right treatment. And of course, that all comes back down to, well, what are the treatments available on ground? What is diagnosis? What is access, etc.? And that has just given me the extra conviction to continue the work that I do, which again, I will talk about shortly. So why does this matter, right? As it stands, current genome-wide association studies, which are currently used for drug discovery processes, are 94% from Eurocentric populations. And majority of them are based on male studies, and that's both preclinical all the way up to in vivo. Why does it matter? Well, because it lacks an understanding of disease biology, which then, of course, translates to the drugs that end up on the market. When we look at this clinical trial process, and you go from preclinical all the way to post-approval, from pharma companies' perspective, it usually takes about 10 years-ish, costing millions of dollars, and I'm sure that these numbers are even underestimated. I'm sure you can see the diversity representation throughout. And what I find interesting as well is that at the moment, when we talk about increasing diversity in clinical trials, A lot of regulation says, yes, let's increase diversity in clinical trials in phase 3 and phase 4. I'm going, well, the ship has sailed. Like that drug is coming to market no matter what. So are we really collecting data that is supporting patient outcomes, or are we just confirming to make sure that this data actually supports getting this drug to market? Now, you move on a bit and you look at medical devices. Why does it matter? Well, found this paper, this was published in February, and you look at data that was examined between 1995 to 2023, of about 700 FDA-approved AI and ML medical devices. And you could look at the stats of what these devices actually reported. 3.6% reported race and ethnicity. 99% provided no socioeconomic data. 81% failed to report age and study of participants. Why does that matter? Well, that matters because if you're putting out drugs and you're putting out medical devices on the market that has not been tested according to gender, age, ethnicity, what does that mean for the end user? What does that mean for patient outcomes? How do we as receivers and users of healthcare actually engage with these drugs, with these treatments, with these vaccines, with these devices? And you might think, okay, maybe that's a little bit far-fetched. Well, again, this was published yesterday. OpenAI and FDA are currently discussing AI for drug evaluations. And I always go, well, we live in the current political climate that we live in, especially in the US. And there's a lot of conversations around increasing diversity in clinical trials. But yet we're going to use AI to assess drugs and prescribe drugs. What data is this AI using? Fundamentally, it's flawed, right? Fundamentally, we're all using ChatGPT, and please, hands up who uses ChatGPT here, by the way. Okay, great. On my way here, I was scrolling through TikTok because, yes, scrolling through TikTok. And I saw on the comment, and someone was saying, please tell me the most unhinged thing you've used ChatGPT for. You've all seen it? Yeah, great. Someone said, I received my DNA genetics from one of the companies. I uploaded it up to ChatGPT, and it's telling me what potentially my health risks could be and what I should do. I kid you not, that freaked me out. Because I went, wow, this is what the world is today. What data is ChatGPT based on? I've just stated the case for what these data sets currently look like. And if we're putting in our database, our data sets in there, what outcomes are we actually getting? And so to those who might say that, well, communities don't care. Obviously, I disagree with that. This is a study conducted by myself, leading a team of about 4 individuals. And we engaged with diverse communities, both women and ethnic minorities, trying to understand what do they care about when it concerns clinical trials, et cetera, and data. And they all said they're concerned about restrictions, effectiveness, side effects. They want strong evidence, which means peer-reviewed scientific research in people that look like us. Well, that clearly puts the case for we need to be participating and be included in the data collection to be able to have these outcomes. 78% of the participants stated that although they knew what clinical trials were, they were less likely, they were still not going to participate in clinical trials. Why is that? Mistrust, lack of knowledge. Some of these reasons are stated, lack of access to trials, but just general a lack of willingness to participate. So again, we have this data gap that keeps on persisting. And participants stated, yes, they knew the need for it, but they were anxious about side effects and causes, and the causes that might happen in the future. And so we see these two sides of this equation, where you have pharma companies on one side wanting to engage in, in clinical, in getting drugs to market and pushing these drugs on the market. I say pushing, getting drugs onto the market. And then you have patients on the other end that are using technology and wanting to engage, and then we're in this middle part, right? And so what does this mean for us, especially in this world of AI? And that is really where we come in. I founded SökerData in 2022 is when it was registered, and really quit my job in June 2023, my full-time role at least, to focus on SökerData. And the vision for SökerData is to be the single source of truth as it pertains to data from women and minority ethnic populations, looking at data from genomic data, genetic data, clinical data, all the way to real-world evidence data. Because a lot of times pharma companies say, I don't have access to those data sets. We're going, okay, we'll find it. We'll provide it for you, give you access to it. But more importantly, where wisdom asks for standardization, where medicine at the moment is almost off the shelf, our biology really asks for precision. Our biology needs to be tailored. And so what we're doing at SökerData is to be able to have these archetypes where you can go, this is a young person, this is an adult, this is an elderly person, and this is what this could look like in a specific person who has this gene, who has this age, and who has this specific ethnicity. We've been fairly successful, I say fairly, over the past 2 years, and we've gotten support from the likes of Techstars and quite a few other renowned organizations. But it's not easy, but we're absolutely committed to this cause. And why do we do that? Because really the goal of prediction and the goal of creating these archetypes is to avoid surprises. I feel like when we talk about diversity, sometimes we overcomplicate it. It really is just as simple as making sure that we can account for every person. That's it. And that is just to avoid surprises, make decisions that are based on evidence, and the various reasons why people collect data, regulatory pressures, patient consent, prediction, the different types of data that we can collect. But at the end of the day, we all just want to know that we did not make a stupid decision. I think you can definitely account for that with me. But so what does that mean, right, to be an agent of inclusion then, if we say this is what we want to do, and what does this mean? And I think this is a call for us as individuals, as much as it's a call to organizations and leaders. It's how are we capturing these data sets? How are we analyzing these data sets? How are we segmenting them? How are organizations making themselves available for partnerships, both locally and internationally? How are we keeping the human element in clinical trials in the world of AI? And really, as individuals, of course, we're all using TikTok, ChatGPT, everything in between. How are we not sitting on the sidelines, and how are we engaging, and how are we participating? Where is the call for us to step up? What does that look like? Is it something that we want to take on? Because at the end of the day, when you look at certain diseases like breast cancer, I think now it's about 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, most likely. And obviously, knock on wood, not wanting to put on anyone, but if you ended up in that situation, at least I would want to know that the drugs I'm taking have had my genetics in consideration. And so this slide is one that I just included as I was talking to Kerry. And I said that this slide is very much really just leaning in on what Kerry and Claire shared earlier on. And I've never done this before, but I'll say this. I flew in from Ibiza, literally an hour before the event. Wait for it. I was in Ibiza for a Pilates retreat. We'll say that. Yes, might have had a few more treats, but it allowed, or at least it gave me 4 days to be able to think about what the goal of SökerData is. Why do I do what I do, right? And a lot of the themes that have been mentioned today, again, by Kerry and Claire, were things that came up during the retreat. And we were made to write down, gratitude journals and etc. And I did write something down, which I'll share a snippet just now. And it sounds grim at the beginning, but just, stay with me and follow through. And it's titled, If I Die Today. And it says, if I died today, I would go grateful. Grateful for a life that didn't wait for permission. A life that danced on the edge, that told the truth even when it cost me. A life that served something greater, health, science, humanity. A life that loved its people fiercely and chased impact like breath. I lived loud, even when my voice trembled, even when I was misunderstood, villainized. I spoke up anyways because silence never saved anyone. Moments of love, spoken and silent, both unmistakably present. Moments where I threw myself into the ring with nothing but faith and raw hope. I would give thanks to every God moment that found me, especially the ones I could never have orchestrated. For every breath in yoga, every pulse in salsa, and every stretch in grace of Pilates. I would hold deep reverence for those who whispered my name in rooms I hadn't entered yet. And so if I could leave one thing behind, one truth etched in skin and sky, it would be this. Live it all. Throw yourself in the ring, even if it breaks you, even if you bleed, because you might get hurt, but you'll be blessed. You might be misunderstood, but you will find your people. You may doubt yourself, but you'll remember your power. And so I would hope that for everyone has the courage one day to throw their whole heart in, because life will meet you there and it will reward you. And so hopefully it's a call to bravery, it's a call to stepping in, it's a call to stepping up. And thank you very much for listening.